All right, welcome to Roger's Cooking Show 101. This is Swedish Pancakes 101. Today's show is going to honor a little piece of my heritage and hopefully inspire you to learn a little bit more about your heritage, especially the food part. I've learned a little bit about my heritage through the years, but there's still a little bit I don't know. My demonstration this morning highlights some of the food culture I've learned over the years. Now, I have a mix of Northeastern European heritage, including Swedish roots. My dad's grandma actually cruised from Sweden back in the day on a luxurious liner and landed in New York. She worked for a couple in New York and then met her husband, and then voila, down the line, here I am. So I've learned a little bit about the Swedish heritage from my great-grandma, from my dad, my grandma, through family talk and food. This morning I'm going to demonstrate my version of Swedish pancakes. My family has adored Swedish pancakes through the years, as long as I can remember. I fondly remember my mom, my grandma, my Aunt Marilyn impressing my taste buds, our family's taste buds, with this delightful treat rooted in my heritage. Now, with Mother's Day just around the corner, I want to dedicate this show to some of those people, some of those mothers, important mothers in my life. My stepmom Linda, my sister Connie, my daughter Kara, my nieces Brianna and Chelsea. They all have worked hard to instill family values into my life and their kids' lives. So this show is dedicated to them. So I'm going to share my recipe with you and demonstrate my technique to make Swedish pancakes from what I've learned from those women in my life, with the hopes that you involve yourself and find out a little bit more about your cultural background. Finding out the food part might make that a fun way to get started. Now, you should know by now that my tagline is usually, now remember, it's not just Roger's way or the highway, it's any way you want to make it. But with this recipe and recipes using flour and sugar and ingredients like that, when you're baking with those ingredients, you want to kind of stick to the recipe. You want to use measuring cups, measuring spoons, and make sure you stick to that recipe so it comes out the way it should. Now, why do I say that I'm using butter and not margarine? Well, I'll tell you why. Because butter is better. Anything else just won't taste good. Use butter. It costs a little bit more, just get it. Use the butter. Now, with the Swedish pancakes, there's some delicious toppings that go with that, including butter, powdered sugar, Knott's Berry Farm boysenberry syrup that you can usually find at Walmart, but with this pandemic, I went and looked for some, and people must be hoarding that boysenberry syrup, just like the paper towels and toilet paper. I have fresh strawberries that I cut up and put a little sugar over and had them set in the fridge overnight. Those are delicious. And you can't have Swedish pancake, or I can't have Swedish pancakes without this whipped cream. I just want to eat some right now. So you want to stick to the recipe when you're making the Swedish pancakes. The recipe I'm using calls for 3 eggs, 3/4 cup of flour, 1 1/4 cups of whole milk, 1 capful of imitation vanilla. If you have regular vanilla, that's good. A 1/2 teaspoon of salt and 2 tablespoons of sugar. So those are the ingredients that you should measure. The toppings that you use, this is where I can say it's not just Roger's way or the highway. It's any way you want to make it, because you can make any topping you want, any topping your heart desires. I'm using strawberries, whipped cream, powdered sugar, and butter. You might think of using maybe chocolate chips or peanut butter, I've heard of some people using Swedish pancakes in a savory dish, and I just can't think of how that would taste. To me, all my life, Swedish pancakes has always been kind of like a brunch dish, a special occasion. Winter holidays, Thanksgiving, Christmas, Easter, Mother's Day, right? Make it sweet and fancy that way. So the hardware that I'm using and supplies, I actually have a crepe pan, crepe, C-R-E-P-E. Do you see how low the lip is on that? I have used a saute pan, just a regular saute pan like this before. And I could make it work, but to make it work the best, this crepe pan works great. I think I paid $10 at Walmart for this thing, or maybe it was Amazon, I'm not sure. And then I have this wooden spatula. It makes it a lot easier to flip the Swedish pancakes. Now the difference between the pancakes that you're used to, the fluffy pancakes that, buttermilk pancakes that you might get at Walmart, versus Swedish pancakes, well, the buttermilk pancakes you get at Denny's, I think I said Walmart, but maybe you can get them at Walmart. But you know, the fluffy, thick pancakes that you get at Denny's and you put maple syrup on top. Swedish pancakes are crepe-like. And if you can picture maybe a burrito wrap tortilla, a flour tortilla, they come in a bag, they're about that big, they're really thin. Well, that's kind of what a Swedish pancake comes out like. Now it's time for my jokes. You guys love my jokes, I know you do. Listen up, these jokes are fun, they're cool. These are Swedish jokes. I'm part Swede, I can tell them, right? So how about a Swedish joke or two before I get going, throwing this recipe together? How do you describe a Swede who is not really a Swede? Yeah? No? Swedish. Yeah, Swedish. Kind of Swedish. That's how you describe a Swede who's not really Swede. Ha ha, get it? Swedish. Here's another one. What do you call a person who lives in Sweden but isn't native to Sweden? Artificial sweetener. I love that one. All right, one more before I get going. Why does Swedish sugar taste better than any other sugar you've had? Because it's sweeter. That's right, Swedish sugar is sweeter than any other sugar you've ever had. Anyways, I'm gonna get going. Hope you guys enjoyed those jokes. My Ninja blender. The first thing I do is crack 3 eggs into the blender jar. That's right, I'm doing this one-handed, just like that. With practice, you can do that too. Now, the next ingredient that I am putting in, the recipe calls for 1 1/4 cups of whole milk. 1 1/4 cups of whole milk. The recipe also calls for 2 tablespoons, 1, of granulated sugar. The next ingredient calls for 1/2 teaspoon of salt. And last but not least, I will add the flour, 3/4 cup of all-purpose flour. There's a 1/2. And 1/4. What's a 1/2 and 1/4? That makes 3/4. So I blended the ingredients. I had technical difficulties. And one thing that I forgot to add was the imitation vanilla. So I'm going to do that now. So that takes one capful of imitation vanilla. Boom. I'll put that back on the blender for about 2 seconds. There we go, Swedish pancake juice. Do you see the consistency? It's kind of milky-like. That's what you want. That's what makes the pancakes thin. If it was regular pancake mix, you know it would be really goopy. When you poured the batter onto the cooking surface, you know, it'd be a blob of batter that would kind of spread out into a pancake like that. Swedish pancakes, you want it this consistency, you want it soupy. So, you know, when you're dealing with flame on the stove, when you're cooking, you want to make sure the flame isn't on so high that you're going to burn things or cook them too quick. For Swedish pancakes, you want the flame on about a medium. It's about that high, not that high. That's about medium. On the dial, it's right in the middle. Get the pan hot. You can go ahead and put butter on there now. Why do I put butter on there? Because butter is better. It makes it taste good. Now we're just gonna wait for the butter to melt. You don't want the butter to melt so much that it burns or gets too dark brown. It's okay if it turns a little brown, but once it starts turning brown, you want to make sure that you get the batter onto the pan right away. I'm actually going to pour this batter into the measuring cup to make it easier. I don't know if you can see that. It's really soupy. It's almost like scrambled eggs when you're getting ready to make an omelet or scrambled eggs. But they don't taste like scrambled eggs, I tell you that. Once you get these cooked up, it's a delightful treat. Anybody can make these. You don't necessarily have to have like a crepe pan like I was saying, like this. You can use a saute pan. You just have to work at it to get the edges lifted up when it's time to flip the pancake. And I'll kind of show you what I'm talking about once this is ready to cook. Just a few more seconds. You want to make sure the whole surface is covered with butter. You don't want that pancake sticking, or we'll have to do take number 2. Now the recipe says you should use between 1/4 cup and 1/3 of a cup of batter per pancake. So I'm taking the batter, just pouring it onto the pan. It's really soupy, the pan's hot. And you want to swirl it around. Can you see how that's swirling around the pan? And you want to swirl it around, keep it over the flame, and kind of continue to swirl it until it won't swirl anymore. I noticed that it broke apart a little bit right here. I can just simply add a little bit more batter to fill in that crack. And so that's what it looks like in the pan. You want to let it cook for about 2 minutes per side. We'll see how it goes. One thing about Swedish pancakes, it takes a little longer to prepare Swedish pancakes for your family, but I'm telling you, the final product is so worth it. We still have another minute or so before it's time to turn this one, but you want to watch the edges. You want to look at the edges and see when they start turning brown. When the edges start turning brown, that's when it's just about time to flip the pancake. So it takes about 2 minutes per side, or 2 minutes for the first side, and once you flip it, it takes about another minute to finish it off on the other side. They're so thin you don't need to cook it much more than that. If you don't have one of these wooden paddles like I have, this is actually designed and made specifically for flipping crepes or Swedish pancakes. Because it has an edge on it, it's wood, it doesn't scratch the non-stick surface on your pan, and it just makes it easy to flip the pancake. I'll show you what I mean in a minute. But you can certainly use a plastic spatula like this. Once the pancake starts turning brown, you see how I'm getting up under there with the spatula? You can certainly use one of these to do what I'm going to show you here with the wooden paddle. I wouldn't try flipping this one like I flipped the eggs a couple weeks ago. You're for sure going to mess it up doing that. And then the technique simply is, make sure I do this right so I don't tear it up. You want to get the spatula, the paddle up under the pancake like that. Kind of aim it back on the pan, flip it over, and then cook the other side. This one didn't get as brown as I wanted it to on the first side, and I think that's because I put a lot of butter in the pan. That's okay. It's going to taste better with all that butter. It just won't be as brown on the first side as it might be on the second side. I know for sure I don't need to add butter into the pan for the second pancake, and that one might turn out brown. Swedish Pancakes 101. If you guys could smell this, you'd be like, your mouth would be watering. I don't know if you can see the edge turning brown there. That's a good sign. And then all we do, Swedish Pancake 101. Boom. There you go. There's one. Let's do a second one. Keep the pan hot. Get about 1/3 of a cup of batter. Pour it on the pan. You need to swirl it around right away, just like that. Fill in all the gaps. Keep swirling until it won't swirl anymore. Kind of like that. We will let that side cook for about a minute. It's looking good, huh? I know it is. I know you're saying, I want some of that. I know that. I know you are. It's okay. We'll see what we can do. So the edges are turning brown. That's an indication that it's time to turn the Swedish pancake. You want to lift up the edge. Take your paddle if you have one and just flip it. And like I said, the second one came out way better than the first one. That one looks really good. I want that one. And then you only need to cook the other side for about a minute. So we'll let that one sit for about 30 more seconds. And then I'll show you how I wrap this up. One great thing about Swedish pancakes for me in my diet is there's less flour than there are in regular pancakes. There's more protein, more eggs. That turns into being way less carbs in a Swedish pancake than there are in regular pancakes. So that's good for me or anybody who watches their diet or counts carbs like I do. So Swedish pancake number 2 is ready to come off. Voila! What'd you guys think? I'm not done yet, but I know you thought that was cool. Let me pull this pan off of the burner. So I'm going to give you a close-up of how I prepare these now. They're at that stage where You see what I mean? How they're kind of like a burrito wrap? But I tell you what, I don't know if I'd rather eat a burrito or a Swedish pancake, but can you see all that butter I blobbed on there? Some of you might think that's gross. I don't. I think it's yummy. I love butter. Why? Because butter is better. That's why. So I put a lot of butter there. The next ingredient is powdered sugar, otherwise known as confectioner sugar. And you can use a technique where you have a spoonful and just kind of tap it on like that. Gives you a little more control. And I don't know, I count my carbs, I'm putting sugar on this, but sometimes you gotta cheat, you know? Sometimes you gotta eat some stuff that you're not supposed to, as long as you don't do it all the time. And then, here's how I roll these up. Kind of just like a burrito. So inside we have a bunch of butter. We have powdered sugar. Inside of Roger's Swedish Pancakes 101. And then, now I talked about boysenberry syrup. Boysenberry syrup from Knott's Berry Farm is the best. Walmart didn't have it. That's where I usually get it. I ran out. The next best thing that Walmart had is this raspberry fruit syrup. Great value. This stuff's pretty good. It's a lot cheaper than the boysenberry stuff. Anyways, I like to dab a little bit of this boysenberry. This is raspberry, but usually boysenberry syrup on top. My freshly prepared strawberries on top of that. Just like that. Remember, this part isn't just Roger's way or the highway. It's any way you want to make it. You put whatever toppings you want on your Swedish pancakes. And then finally, the fun part. You can jazz this up. Put some, do three little piles of it. And then even lastly, you can take a little more powdered sugar and just kind of spread it around like that. There you have it. Roger's Swedish Pancakes 101. Give me where's a fork? Oh, or a shovel. Give me a shovel. I don't need a fork, I want a shovel.